Hello, everybody. This is the 11th episode of Serpask series, and my name is Deliverability. I'm the head of SEO at Serpact. We have another special guest today, very especially popular around one of the most funny, interesting, and educational hangouts with John Miller recently. And yes, and his name is Jason Barnard. He has almost 2 decades of experience. He started promoting his first website in the year Google was incorporated. Wow. And built it up to become one of the top 10,000 most visited sites in the world. And today he is a digital marketing consultant, speaker, author, and host of the SEO is AEO podcast. It's a very popular podcast. And the most fun you will have learning about digital from the experts. Hello, Jason. We're very happy to see you here.
Yeah, lovely to meet you, Dido.
Yeah, thank you.
It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this conversation. We've planned more or less what we're going to say on a professional front, and it's going to be really cool.
Okay, let's first talk a little bit about you and your person, and let us know how did you start with SEO and what do you love about SEO mostly?
Yeah, well, I started with SEO in 1998. I created some cartoon characters with my wife, and I was a blue dog, and we created games and songs and animations, and to promote it, we did a lot of SEO and concentrated on Google right from 1998, 1999, and built it up. And by the end of it, 2008, we had 1 million visits from Google every month for a kid's site.
Wow.
Exactly. And so when all that kind of stopped, I just segued into SEO because it was the only place I could get work. And I just said to people, you know, look, I got 1 million people a month onto Buwan Koala, the blue dog and the yellow koala kids site. If I can do that for them, then I can do the same for you. And that's how I got the work in SEO.
1 million visitors this year. This is really amazing. What were your first tactics you applied when it comes to SEO to your website?
What, the first things I do, or what do I prefer?
Yeah, the first things you did on your website when you started with SEO.
Oh, yeah, with Buwan Koala in 1998, we were creating 1 page per search engine and per variation of a word. So you would have kid games, kids game, kids games, kid game, and then you would have that for AltaVista, for Google, for Lycos, for Infoseek, for Hotbot. So we'd have, I mean, I've done 1 keyword basically there, and we've already got like 10 pages. And the biggest challenge was maintaining the pages. And each page would have a different weighting of keywords to other words that was specific to each search engine. So we spent a lot of time calculating using spreadsheets the relative weighting for each keyword for each search engine, and then keeping the pages updated. And we ended up with, I don't know, 100,000 pages just for covering, you know, 1,000 keywords.
I'm pretty sure that this will be very interesting to our audience. Is this website still alive?
Yeah, it is still alive. I stopped working on it in 2008, so it's kind of gone down the hole a little bit. But I mean, the games are still there, the songs are still there, and they're all still brill, but the site doesn't actually appear very well in the search engines because I stopped working on it.
Whoa.
Well, maybe, I don't know. And the other interesting thing about that period of time is we didn't do link building. We had this quality content, and teachers and parents and nursery schools and people would link to us because it was valuable content, because it was interesting, because they liked it. And so my experience in the link building field, or getting links, was 1998 to 2008, when people were giving links and happy to give links. And the concept of the internet was sharing, and the idea that bots could actually crawl around the web. And, you know, 2008, let's say to 2018, everyone became very selfish with their links and said, I don't want to give links, I don't want to lose my juice. And for me, that goes against what a bot does. I mean, obviously, Google must get very upset when it goes to a site and it hits a dead end and it has to turn around and go out again, because that's not how a bot functions. So I've always been very keen to encourage people to give links. And nicely right now, I think that's coming back into fashion. People are starting to link out to get that, to prove, sorry, what they're saying is true. Expertise, authority, and trust is encouraging the outbound links, which I find really, really, really cool. And the other thing is we don't count keywords anymore, which is really cool.
So once the Google Hummingbird was implemented, maybe you have changed your strategy on the content side.
Yeah, I mean, I've completely changed, obviously, from a very technical word counting and link counting strategy, which is incredibly simplistic now we look back on it. Very easy for people to cheat, very easy to spam. The last 2 or 3 years, we've seen it all move away from keyword counting to natural language processing as an idea with a co-occurrence and context clouds, which Bill Slawski talks a lot about. Dawn Anderson's a big fan of co-occurrence and relatedness. And I'm a really big fan of that. And this idea that you can create a cloud of context around whatever it is you're talking. You don't need to use the synonyms. You don't have to repeat words stupidly. And that's very, very, very encouraging.
Okay.
Oh, and the other thing, sorry, to come back to links again, is also that mentions have become important. And Google can recognize mentions of your brand. They don't necessarily need the link. So we're talking about linkless links, which is really cool as well, which means you can actually do more traditional marketing and more traditional communication. So I'm a happy bunny.
Oh yes, for sure. And you have actually you're very flexible because you have changed your strategy so many times, and that's why we are here to talk about SEO strategies. But before that, let's talk a little bit about your hangout with John Mueller.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. And we've seen that a lot of people were talking about it and commenting it, and they're very happy with what you did there. So tell us a little bit more details. How did you get there, and what was your intention? Was it intentional actually, or you did it just on the go?
Yeah, well, if John Mueller watches this video, he will now know the evil plan that I hatched. My daughter wanted to give me a ticket to the Stray Cats for my birthday, and they weren't playing anywhere near where I was living at the time, and I knew I was going to be traveling, and I thought, where should I go? And I thought, well, I'm going to go to Zurich because I used to play music in the street there, but also because I know Google have offices there, and I thought I might be able to get an interview with somebody at Google if I happened to be in the same place, and as it turns out, it worked out very well. James Brockbank suggested that I do an interview with John Mueller, and John Mueller answered, yeah, great, and then said, why don't you come to the Hangout too? So it kind of all snowballed from this initial idea, which was for me to see my favorite band, from a present for my daughter, to choosing Zurich, to ending up sitting in that Hangout. And it was a really nice Hangout. I mean, John Mueller is such a nice guy.
Yes, totally. I have the pleasure and the honor to meet him several times, and he's really one of the kindest persons on the planet, along with Martin Split. And they really explain a lot. They really provide really valuable answers to our questions and our concerns and all.
And what I wanted to do, I did a podcast episode with him, and what I wanted to look into, he wanted to do a day in the life at Google, and part of what I wanted to talk about in that was how he's often misrepresented and how difficult that must be for him, and he's quoted out of context all the time, and people take a specific comment he's made and they will apply it to absolutely everything and say this is the law of Google, is that you should never link out, or whatever it might be, and he was saying very clearly, in fact, most of the advice he gives are very site specific. And so when people do that, they're taking something very specific and applying it to a general theory or an idea or a general rule that just doesn't work. And he was saying about two-thirds of everything he is quoted as having said is taken out of context.
Yes, believe me, we have been struggling with this with our clients and projects here, that there are no such thing as general rules. They differ from phrase to phrase. They differ from niche to niche, from website to website sometimes. And you have to be careful. You have to be flexible. You have to observe what is going on the SERP, to be able to reflect these changes and to be able to see what is important, what kind of features are important, so you can be you can achieve a little bit better or way better search performance if you do the things in the right way.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, just to come into that, Stephen
Yes.
Van Vessen was saying that SEO is like a puzzle. We've got all these pieces that go together.
Yes.
And what you're saying is, in fact, for each client, the puzzle pieces come together slightly differently. And we need to be flexible. We need to take that step back and build the puzzle in a way that will function for the business model of the person or the company we're working for. I think that's a great point.
Absolutely, yes. What do you offer about SEO mostly? What's your, I don't know, what's in your heart when it comes to SEO?
But it changes. A few months ago, it was the knowledge graph. I'm a really big fan of the knowledge graph. And now I'm really looking into the SERPs. I mean, since Gary Ilias told me or explained to a room full of people when I asked the question how the algorithm of Google functions in terms of how it decides to bring in the rich elements like the knowledge graph or videos or images or carousels or Twitter boxes or whatever it might be, all those rich elements, and that they're all bidding against each other. It's a bid of the value that they can bring to the user in the context the user finds themselves in. And that changes for me the entire perception of how I'm looking at SEO today. And that's been, what, 2 months? He told me all this in May. And you look at the 10 blue links and you're saying, okay, they're disappearing. Each time Google brings in a rich element, one of the blue links disappears from a result set. So we're now looking at saying, not how do we compete for the blue links, but how do we push these rich elements to replace the blue links, to leapfrog over everybody else.
Yes.
Competing for the blue links has become impossible, and it's a losing battle because they're disappearing little by little. And I was using the idea of Darwinism, is that they're losing their place through evolution. So if I want to rank now on page 1 for whatever it might be, maybe my best strategy is to do videos or to do images or to do a Google My Business or a map presence or a carousel or a position 0 or whatever it might be. Any of these rich elements is an opportunity for me to leap up and push myself into the results, where all I need to do, and that's the crucial part, is prove to Google that there is more value in my content, my rich content, than there is in the blue link that's ranking #1. And that isn't so difficult to do because Google wants this multimedia content, because their SERPs are becoming multimedia pages, in my view, and that's where we're moving towards. And that's completely blown my mind, and I'm still trying to digest it.
Yes, and we're the SEO specialists. We're the people who should teach our clients and the owners of the projects. We optimize that this kind of interactive content is really, really important, and we must include this type of content into the content strategy. But before that, let's start talking about what is an SEO strategy today, in your opinion?
That's a leading question, because I told you that I had an answer to it, which is brilliant. When I was in Australia, I went to Australia on a whim. Kate Toon said, "Why don't you come to Australia?" And I said, "Why don't I come to Australia?" And I just went there. I didn't really think much about it. And then I asked that question to Gary Ilias, who then explained the whole SERP ranking system to me. And then when I was there, I was supposed to give 3 talks. And I had a 3-pillar strategy. It was pertinence, understanding, and credibility. And I'd figured out what I was going to say for understanding. There's a lot to say about that. It's the knowledge graph. It's communicating to Google what it is we do and who we are. And then credibility, which is EAT, proving that we are worthy of being recommended by Google. And that's what it's doing. It's recommending us to its clients, its users. And if we want to be recommended by Google, we have to prove that we're credible. And then I looked at the pertinence part, and I was thinking, I've got nothing to say. I don't have anything important to say or anything interesting to say. And then I came up with deliverability. And it's the idea that we need to be understood by Google, we need to be credible, but it needs to be able to deliver the content we have produced to the user in the user's current context. And that's phenomenally important. And then you can say, okay, we can actually get rid of pertinence, because if I have explained to Google what it is I do, what it is I'm offering, it's up to Google to figure out if I'm pertinent or not. I don't have to worry about that. Obviously, we can think about it. We can do keyword research. But if I am relevant, it's up to Google to figure out if I'm relevant or not, based on its understanding. So my role is not to figure out where am I relevant, but how can I best explain to Google in terms that Google will understand, and in terms that my potential users will be using, where keyword research obviously does come into play. So the pertinence part is actually outside our control, whereas understanding, credibility, and deliverability are all three within our control. And the theory I now have is that any single SEO tactic we have had in the past that is still valuable today fits into one of those three. So everything we do as SEOs needs to serve understanding, credibility, or deliverability.
Okay, we will get into more details in the next minutes around these three pillars, but let's continue with one very disputable question. To be documented or not to be documented, the SEO strategy. What do you think about this?
To be what, sorry, or what?
To be documented or not to be documented?
Documented?
Yeah. On a document, to be written on a document.
In terms of myself or in terms of my content?
No, in general, at all. Do you think that it's important, our strategy, to be written on documents and to follow it step by step, and to make planning and organization and so on? Because we've seen that many companies just like they forget about that, and they're kind of we will do this, we will do that, we will do this, we will do that, back and forth, and in the end of the day, they don't know what they have to measure and what kind of deliverables they have. So what do you think about the documentation of the process of the SEO strategy, though?
Yeah, I think it's phenomenally important. It's the part that I don't like, but I think it's really, really important. What I like is coming up with the strategies and saying, here's what we need to do. With my clients these days, that is really interesting. Is before I just used to sit with the technician, the developer, and talk about code and HTML to text ratios and site speed, and the developer would have 80 or 90% of all the responsibility of the work that we were putting in place. And today we can say a developer has, let's say, 20%, because you've got the press relations person, you've got the content writer, you've got the social media person, and you've got the UX people, and all these four people are just as important as the developer is today. So you're now saying, nice news for us all is, A, we don't rely on the developer so much, but also the developer doesn't have all that responsibility. And that's important, because I think developers spend a lot of time kind of thinking, oh, all this responsibility, if I get it wrong, the whole thing goes down the toilet. And you're saying, actually, if you get it wrong, the press person or the content person or the UX person will save the day. And so you have this collective responsibility across the whole team, or with all the departments, saying, if any one of you isn't up to the mark on any particular period of time, it doesn't matter, because the other ones will hold you up. So, and then the documentation part is saying, yes, you all need to document what you're doing and make sure that it's all fitting together. And in that sense, somebody like myself becomes not only a strategist, but a project manager who oversees this and makes sure it all fits together. And if you can find a nice way, or somebody who can do the documentation for me so I don't have to do it, I would be really happy.
Yeah. So which components of the SEO strategy are most important, and can you order them by priority, in your opinion?
I was talking to Judith Lewis on the podcast, who's a really great SEO lady. And she was saying you have to do technical first, then you have to do content, then you have to do link building, then you have to do your more general social strategy towards your users, which I would tend to agree with. I think that's a very good approach and very easy way of saying it. But that being said, I would say that obviously crawlability and indexability are the first thing. If you don't have those, you can't ever get anywhere. So you get your crawlability and indexability, which is purely technical. You get that right. Site speed is important, but I don't think it's fundamentally important. Understanding is fundamentally important. So I would say get yourself crawlable and indexable, get yourself into Google, then start explaining to Google who you are and what you do. That's the understanding part. What it is you're offering, who it's going to be relevant for, and that's where Google can calculate the relevance for you. And explain it in a manner that Google can grasp. And that means clear content writing with great co-occurrence and context clouds and relatedness, plus lots of schema markup. People like Martha Van Berkel are very good at schema markup if you want to follow somebody for that. Plus perhaps some HTML5, or at least, and John Mueller was saying to me, you might not need HTML5, semantic HTML5. What you do need is to make sure that your site is consistent across all the pages, that the sections are all coded in the same manner, and that you use classes and IDs consistently across your site, which allows Google to then identify which parts of the content are important, which are the menus, which are the footers, which are the asides. So you've got this understanding. Add to that with the understanding is getting out there and getting other people to confirm it. Very easy for me to say, I widgets, or I sell blue widgets. And if I can get somebody else, a third party, a trusted third party, to confirm that I sell blue widgets, Google then knows that I do sell blue widgets and I'm not just saying it. And it becomes confident. And that's very important, is Google needs to understand, and then it needs to be confident that it's understood. And that confidence and understanding comes from corroboration by other people, third parties, trusted third parties. And now you come into a question about link building, which is we tend to think of link building as saying I need a link from popular sites, but popular sites are not necessarily trustworthy sites. Gossip sites would be a great example. They've got loads of page rank, they've got loads of links coming in, but they aren't trustworthy sources. And Google is now looking at trust-based knowledge, which is in Luna Dong, who invented the idea and is now at Amazon, who are also working on a similar project. And so you've got this knowledge that needs to be built up. It needs to be confirmed by third parties, and it needs to be confirmed by trusted third parties. And you cannot rely on domain authority or page rank to judge the trustworthiness of a site. So once you've got yourself indexed, that's where I start explaining.
We have a quick question by our audience here. They are asking about what do you think? What is the role that the user experience and the conversion rate optimization are playing into the SEO strategy?
Okay, yeah, I mean that's a good one, because if I'm looking at it from my 3 pillars of understanding, credibility, and deliverability, it's one of the few things that doesn't really fit particularly well. I would say it comes into credibility in the idea that when Google sends somebody to our site, and that person stays on, and that person either stays on the site or finds the answer on the site, the question, and we've been talking a lot about bounce rates and kangaroo hopping, whatever it's called, pogo sticking. And I don't agree with that as an idea. The concept is much more, Google's got the query from the user. If the user's made a query like, I'm looking for blue widgets, goes to a site, bounces out within 5 seconds and says, I'm looking for a horse. Then the assumption there is that the person has found the answer to their question. They might have bounced, but they found the answer to the question. So the question of pogo sticking or bounce rates is much more, what is the next query after the query when they came to my site? And UX is going to play a great deal into that, in terms of when you come to the site, if it loads fast, you're more likely to say, there's somebody said, after a second we start to drift, and after 2 seconds we've forgotten what we were doing. And that, I don't know how true it is, but it is true that kind of we've become so impatient. You click on the link, and I tell my clients, somebody types in looking for blue widgets. I see blue widgets in a title, meta title. Then I see the description says, we have the best blue widgets, and it promises me the solution. I click on it. By the time the page is loaded, be it 1 second or 2 seconds, I've almost forgotten what it is I'm looking for. I've been distracted by something else. And the H1 needs to confirm that I have found a page with blue widgets. Said, you have found blue widgets would be the ideal H1. And I think we forget that people are coming in out of context, and we think, oh, they're in context. But in fact, because of the page load time, they're often losing that context. So the UX is saying it needs to load fast, it needs to promise, or it needs to deliver the promises that I've given them in the meta description, and I need to be comfortable within the site so that I actually finalize whatever it is I need to do on that site, be it read the article, watch the video, buy the product, sign up for a newsletter. And that means that when I go back to Google, I don't repeat the query again. That's what we're looking to do, is making sure the user doesn't repeat the query.
Yeah, exactly. And the results will not be changed. They are trying to serve the best results, and to serve them as many times as possible, because otherwise they will change again and again and again until the algorithms find the best results. Of course, with regards to the experience of the user, which is the most important thing for Google and for us, of course, and for our potential
and the UX comes in as well into the deliverability part. Is a UX very simply? I mean, if you don't have a design that's working on mobile, a responsive design, your UX is obviously rubbish, and it can't deliver, so it won't deliver. Well, it won't deliver if it can find any kind of better alternative. So UX also comes into deliverability. And the other interesting thing about UX, I mean, I do a little bit of Google ads, and I like DSA, dynamic search ads, because it bases itself on SEO, which is where I'm most comfortable. And the interesting thing about that is once you've got your campaign set up and you've optimized it and your SEO is doing well, the only thing you can do to pull your cost per acquisition down is to improve the UX and the sales funnel. And that is something where you're saying you're actually working on something that improves every single channel of acquisition. And I find that very, very powerful, is you're saying anything UX that improves your conversion rates is going to help every single channel. SEO, ads, social, and companies that aren't doing that are missing out on something enormously big. And I think a lot of companies miss out on it because they underestimate its importance.
Yes, we truly believe in that, and we also really want to implement this kind of software tools for tracking the user sessions and just to see how they interact with the elements of the websites, and sometimes changing just a little bit, just a little bit on some of the elements like titles, by adding a line or another title, or maybe adding another sign-up form, or maybe something like that. It changed the conversion rates enormously. And significantly, significantly, because you just give the people what they want to see, and this also reflects the search results and the positions of the website. So we truly believe that this kind of user experience on the website at all, and the user experience on the search results, really reflects how well we're positioned on Google.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, and moving on from that, or extending from that, I saw Cal Gillis at Digital Elite in London, and he gave a brilliant talk about exactly that. And he showed 2 screenshots, and he was saying, which do you think is the most performant, which is the one that worked best? And everyone said the one on the left. And he said, actually, no, the one on the right, the one on the left is one we thought would work best, and the one on the right is the one that actually works best. And then he went on to say, think about how you're addressing your users in terms of the content, and address things from their point of view, which most companies don't do, unfortunately. And he pointed out that Booking.com, when you get through to the page just before you pay, I think the number is 25 times they say the word you. And you don't notice it. But you don't notice it. I use Booking.com quite a lot. And you come to that page, and it registers somewhere in your subconscious that they're saying you. And they've done it incredibly subtly, so that I don't think, oh, that's heavy-handed. And so that as well, the wording you're using is going to change. Not just the design, not just the button size or the button color, but the wording and the way you address people, and the fact that you're addressing their real, what people say is pain points. I don't really like that, but addressing my problem and providing a solution, and doing it in a very clear manner. And a lot of people don't do that, including myself. Express very clearly and simply, you have a problem, we have the solution.
Yes, I have thought many times to people who are asking me about Booking that they're playing with the people feelings, they play with the emotions, because they're trying to make you feel like you're at home. Doesn't matter if you are not at home at all, but they're trying to make this feeling for you with their pages, which is, I think it's significant, because not so many websites can do it today. They're trying to improve themselves as much as possible, but when people are asking about why Booking is so successful, I think that's why this is one of the main reasons why, because they're trying to provide it with the best accommodation property, and it could be a hotel, it could be an apartment, a house, and so on, but they're trying to give you the best to you, and to promise you that you will get back again, because this is the best solution for you.
Okay. And as we were saying earlier on, sorry, it's not a very beautiful site. Design-wise, it isn't so very beautiful, but it's comfortable and it's easy to use, and
Yes.
That's where it's coming from. But my taste in design, my judgment of it is I don't actually think it's pretty, but it doesn't need to be pretty, it needs to be functional.
Oh yeah, actually they are one of the best proofs on the point that the most brilliant and most beautiful design is not the main reason for the people to convert, but it has to be user-friendly and understandable. And so we're again coming to the first pure code understanding. So I have two questions really important for you. And one of these questions actually is covered by our audience. How do you think we can optimize for SERP SEO today? And do you think that we can understand better by a keyword research, but I mean really detailed, comprehensive, and a really good semantic keyword research? We can understand our target audience, and how do you think this could be implemented in the SEO strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the most important part of keyword research is not necessarily knowing which keywords to stuff into your pages, but knowing your audience and knowing what language they're using so you can use the same language. So it's much less for me today, the idea of saying, let's match the keywords to the users so that we can please Google because Google likes these simple matches. We're saying, let's match the words we're using to the vocabulary of our users. And in fact, it goes through keyword research on tools like SEMrush, but also through Search Console, which I love. I think Search Console is a mine of information that people often overlook. And one interesting point, just to go off track a little bit, that I mentioned to John Mueller when we were having our conversation, was that I think you can see what keywords your competitors are tracking by looking at Search Console. If you look at a word like selling flowers, or selling beautiful flowers, I don't know. If you look in Search Console and you're ranking page 90, position 90, page 9, nobody clicks through that far. And if the search volumes on the page 9 are pretty high, it's a high probability that these tracking tools are tracking it because they go through to page 10, whereas users don't. So if you look at those deeper queries that you're ranking page 9 for, you can find quite easily which keywords, your competitors are tracking with tools like SEMrush, because it will have that relatively unexpectedly high volume of searches on page 9.
Yeah.
There you go.
And especially if we see a really big amount of impressions.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I meant, impressions. Yeah.
And if our website is not well positioned for this phrase, but we really see really big impressions, and you really actually pointed to your statement. It's absolutely brilliant at the moment. It means actually that this keyword is really important both for our users and for our competitors, I would say.
Exactly. And I mean, the only kind of downside is you get disappointed because the number of impressions you would expect on page 1, given the 300 or 400 that you're getting on page 9, it won't be quite as big as you expected because of this kind of bias that SEMrush and other tools are giving it. But that was, and the other thing was actually asking your users what vocabulary they use, and I think that's underestimated, is using social media, analyzing your Twitter feed or your Facebook pages or your LinkedIn or whatever it is, and also asking your sales department. What questions are people, or sales or support, in fact, sales and support, what questions are people asked before they buy? Are they asking before they buy? What questions are they asking after they've bought? What vocabulary are you using? And so if you have a kind of internal system whereby the people who manage social, the people who are doing sales, the people who are doing support are all pushing vocabulary into this big bucket, and then you can use that to actually add that to SEMrush and Search Console data and create yourself a real context cloud which corresponds to your business, and then break it down into the pages where they're going to be relevant. And I think that's a really powerful way to move forward, but it does require several departments working together, and that isn't always easy to get.
Yes, totally agree. And if you have to make a really detailed keyword research, maybe let's say it's a semantic keyword research, because Google is getting more and more semantic search engine. how would you define the characteristics of your audience just by looking the phrases? And would you start with the phrases just to understand what are the characteristics of the potential audience, along with the SERP, of course?
Yeah, I mean, maybe in terms of kind of how you think about the content on your pages, saying I've got one main question, maybe several sub questions, and then I need to build around that with the vocabulary they are using. And coming back to Dawn Anderson and Bill Slawski, using co-occurrence and relatedness, and to build the context cloud. And one thing I think is possibly interesting, but might be absolute rubbish, is that if Google's using Wikipedia a lot to understand and train its NLP algorithms, logically speaking, if you use co-occurrence and relatedness using words from Wikipedia, you should be better understood by Google. That's a theory I have, and I don't know if it's true, but I quite like it. But I think the important thing is not trying to trick Google by using words from Wikipedia.
Yes, of course.
But much more to create this co-occurrence and relatedness and context cloud using the vocabulary of users. And that comes back to what I was saying just before, is actually asking your users as well as using SEMrush and Search Console.
Yes, totally. I've read actually, I don't remember, maybe it was on Quora, that it was actually a post by a Googler and he said that it's not important to know how the Google algorithms are working, exactly because they're just a source code. They're part of them are actually publicly available. They're on GitHub page and they're not something special, but it's important how they are trained. It's important how they collect the information and how they use it, how they reprocess it. So they will serve the information in the form of search results to us and to our potential audience, our projects. So I think that maybe Wikipedia is part of that, but along with that, the Google algorithms are learning and they're trying to be as best as possible to learn from the most authoritative websites. These websites established in a niche. And I think that what you said is really, really interesting and important, that yes, it's not just Wikipedia. We have to take a look at our competitors. We have to take a look at the bloggers. We have to take a look at the Web3 websites, let's say that way. I didn't hear this phrase, but it's very commonly used today. Like Quora, like Reddit, like Twitter, maybe the social media. We have to take a look at these websites just to know that they're using, our audience is using specific phrases. We have to find a way how to implement them in our content and maybe our strategy, our content strategy.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely.
Yes, and what other thing could you include in the understanding process? What are your tips for better understanding by Google when we create the content, when we create the pages and so on? Do you believe that the modules on the page, not just the content, but the module on the page, are really pretty important part of this?
The what on the page, sorry?
The other elements like forms, like letters, like maybe widgets with information.
I think images are very important and we underestimate them. I know that Gary Ilias is now obsessed by images and videos. So if he's starting to get obsessed by it, then it does mean it's very important. And so using images, alt tags properly, image names, but also the figure HTML5, semantic HTML5 element to put the fig caption underneath to describe the image. And tables as well, incredibly important. Apparently 80% of tables on the web are used for design and not for data. Google has a terrible problem sorting out the data from the design. Using tables properly to actually present data and not using them for design is an incredibly important part of making your pages. And if you look at understanding, I mean, obviously tables, anything that's tabular data or listed or unordered or ordered lists, very easy for Google to digest. And you have schema markup, incredibly important because it's name value pairs where you're explaining to Google, you know, name, Jason Barnard, occupation, digital marketer, and it's very simple for Google to actually pass that. And when you look at schema markup, it brings us on nicely to the knowledge graph because it's describing entities with relationships and attributes, which is what a knowledge graph is. And that's how Google is now understanding the world. So if you have an entity, for example, Dido, the entity Dido has a relationship with the entity Jason, and that relationship is knows. It also has interviewed. Dido lives in Bulgaria. Jason is in St. Petersburg, and we have entities like St. Petersburg, Bulgaria, with relationships to the entities. So I actually have an indirect relationship right now with Bulgaria. Jason is talking, entity Jason in St. Petersburg is talking to entity Dido in Bulgaria. I am indirectly related to Bulgaria at this moment. And that's incredibly important as well, is you understanding that relationship right now is pretty simple. And then you multiply it by all the relationships, all the attributes, and right now, and it gets very complicated. But then you think, let's take it to another dimension. In 20 minutes, I won't be talking to you. I won't have that relationship with Bulgaria. It will be an X relationship with Bulgaria, indirect relationship with Bulgaria. And what Google and Bing are trying to do is keep up with that. Not only the relationships between entities and the attributes of entities at any given moment in time, but over time as they change, which they do incessantly. And the really neat example of that a guy from, I can't remember his name, I'm afraid, from Amazon, who was with Graphic that Amazon bought, he was saying that Google Maps is a perfect example, or a good example, of a real life knowledge graph functioning fully today, whereby I can ask it a geospatial query that it has never heard before, and it can give me an answer by relating entities like, where can I get a cheap coffee at this time? It's never had that question from me with my taste that it knows for a coffee shop at this time in this particular place. And if I give it and that's astonishingly interesting. And Google Maps is doing a reasonably good job of keeping up with the changes over time, but obviously it's not perfect. So it's got a lot of work to do. But Google Maps, if you want to understand how a knowledge graph functions, think about Google Maps.
Yeah, exactly. And do you believe that knowledge graph, and of course we know about Omnibot, but let's talk a little bit about knowledge graph. Do you believe that it plays a really big role for processing the queries with entities? Do you think that it works there, right? Because we really believe it, and we have seen this when we make analysis of our project, and we see that when you include an entity in a phrase or search phrase, it could be something absolutely meaningless. But if you include it and all the elements that are already that knowledge graph already collected some good information and rich information around the entity, they're presented on the search results. So it really plays a really big part and really big role of processing these entities in the queries. And maybe, do you believe that the keyword research, the knowledge graph, the hummingbird, all of them are centered around the query that the people are looking for on the search engine like Google, for example, and it's kind of related along with the UX and the content. Do you believe that?
I mean, you make an incredibly good point there, and the Bill Slawski would love you, because that query pool that they have is phenomenally big, and they're pulling information out of that, and they're able to identify entities. Dave Davis is saying entities are the single most important thing in SEO today, full stop. I'm going to PubCon. I'm going to be talking with Elmer, I can't remember his second name, I really apologize, about entity-based SEO. And he's got a slide deck which knocked me off my feet. Unfortunately, he said everything I was going to say, so I've got to think of something else to say now. But it's phenomenally interesting. There's a lot of people looking into this now of how to look at search queries and our pages and the content from a perspective of, is it an entity and how can I identify it as such? And if you look at that, it's moving us away from ambiguity. And saying Google has understood this entity, and you even have at query level, search query, user query level, disambiguation. If I say sympathy for the devil is an example I've used. I mean, my thought is the Rolling Stones, but there's a film, there's another group, called that. There's a book, there's several versions. Motorhead did a version, Stone Roses did a version. Oh no, it was Guns N' Roses who did a version. Sorry. And so you have this ambiguity. So once I type sympathy to the devil and I get the Stone Roses coming up, or Motorhead coming up, or the East European group coming up, then I will say, sympathy for the devil's Rolling Stones. So I give it context. And so as users, we're starting to do that more. And then we look at voice search, take that a little step further. In voice search, we would tend to give more context straight away.
Yeah, and I intentionally wanted to put some more accent on the understanding, because this is where people are making the most mistakes today when it comes to the optimization. But let's talk a little bit about the credibility and deliverability. What do you think is a credible website for Google?
That's a very good question, because the idea of credibility, I mean, everyone's talking about EAT, expertise, authority, and trust.
Today.
The word credibility for me englobes all of that. But who is an expert, who is authoritative, and who is trustworthy? That's a very difficult question to answer. And if you look and you say, okay, I need to seed that, and that's what apparently Google are doing, is seeding it from known trusted sources, much in the way that PageRank might have done that as well, is coming away from trusted sources to say, because this has an indirect link to this trusted source, it is therefore trustworthy if the information corroborates what is said on that source. But it gets very complicated very quickly when you start thinking about that. So building up credibility in the eyes of Google, I think, is a mixture of both your expertise and your authority as seen by your peers or as confirmed by your peers. But also the credibility as confirmed by your clients or the people who follow you, or whichever it might be. And we're coming into an era where reviews are the very obvious example of how to build up your credibility in terms of explaining it to Google. I am credible. My users do appreciate what I'm proposing, what I'm offering to them. And reviews also, one of Google's patents, once again, Bill Slawski pointed this out, is using it to pull attributes from entities. And I use the example when I'm looking for a coffee, I say coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. And when it pulls up the result, it will pull up the review that says free Wi-Fi. So it's pulling up that attribute of having free Wi-Fi in the coffee shop from the review, not from the description that the shop owner has given. So understanding is also coming in here once you start talking about reviews, and that's very powerful. It's great. And
the woven ontology technology today, we really love it, because this is all the characteristics around the entities that are collected by the ontology.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, and moving on from there as well. Sorry, the last point about that credibility with your users, I think people tend to forget is, or in fact, two things: is one of your social interaction with them and forum interaction, and actually discussing with people publicly. I mean, we're interacting with our users or our clients, and a lot of the time, Google is actually watching us do it. When it's on a public forum, when it's on a social media site, obviously it's not the same when it's private messaging, but Google is watching how we interact with our clients, how we reply to those reviews. But I suspect also, and Judith Lewis once again was talking about this, I think we forget about after-sales searches. If somebody's searching for spare part for a Thompson washing machine, if Thompson can give that answer, that makes them much more trustworthy, much more authoritative and expert and credible, because they're supplying themselves the correct answer to their own clients. And if they're letting somebody else do it, they don't look so clever.
Yes, absolutely. But we have also seen another examples that if you start working on your brand, of course, which is really important today, and you really have the knowledge to provide a really good answer, sooner or later, Google will recognize it for sure. And you will get into a feature snippet, for example, and it will reward you for sure, because you provide this actionable type of advice. And this is really important today for people, because they would like to find the best answer as fast as possible. And I think that Google really brilliantly understands it.
Yeah, no, sure, 100%. And what you're saying there, sorry, to pull that, I'd almost forgotten about brand. I mean, brand is phenomenally important. Building my brand, instead of building the credibility or the links into a website, I'm now building my brand. And theoretically, I could change websites with my brand, as long as my brand goes with it. There should be, theoretically, possible if my brand is strong enough. So we're now looking at building brand, which is very pre-internet concept. So we're coming back to these pre-internet concepts of looking after your users and your clients and building your brand and being credible. And that idea of building my brand also plays into the rich elements like the answer boxes or the videos or the Twitter feeds, or because I've got the Twitter boxes for my name because I built my personal brand, and I got it because I built my personal brand. So you end up with that situation. We're coming right back to what I was saying earlier on, is maybe the opportunities for us are much more in the rich elements that we can push in with more value than the blue links, rather than concentrating on trying to get those rankings in the blue links. Concentrate on pushing the blue links down with our rich elements, and those rich elements will come in because Google trusts the source.
Yes,
and that means building your brand.
Building a brand, totally brilliant. Say, thank you, a really great statement. And actually, I will use it when I prepare the recap of the webinar. I will use it for sure, and I will mention it because it's a really brilliant statement.
Which I almost forgot to make.
Actually, the brand is extremely important today, and I hope more people will understand it more and more, because if you don't work on your brand, and if you just rely on the phrases and the SEO at all, you will have to wait a lot.
Yeah.
You will have to wait a lot, maybe years. I don't know. Nobody knows actually, but you really have to wait a lot, because without a brand, this is something that is, I think, is almost impossible today, especially if you don't engage, if you don't comment, if you don't discuss, if you don't communicate with your audience.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that last little phrase as well. That's absolutely right. And Ross Havendale says there are only 3 things we need to look at. It's brand, it's brand, and it's brand.
Yes.
Which is cool. Not necessarily 100% true, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we are almost running out of time, but we have another question, which is kind of maybe wackyly related to the deliverability. What do you think is a deliverability, and how would you measure it? This is the question from our audience. How would you measure the success of your SEO strategy?
That's a very good question. I'll come to what is deliverability. I mean, deliverability, obviously, it starts with site speed. It starts with HTML that can be properly read by Google so that it can actually pull that information and deliver it in its own SERPs. It's deliverability in terms of the content being appropriate for the context in which the user finds themselves.
Another statement formation.
So if I'm on a mobile shell, the deliverability will be the fact that it's geolocalized if I'm looking for something local.
Totally, yeah.
So it's my context in terms of geo, my context in terms of language, my context in terms of what I was doing just before and what I'm doing now, but also the context of the type of content that is most suited to the request I have made. So if I'm asking for an answer to a very simple question like 1 and 1, what's 1 plus 1? Obviously, the format is just going to be text or perhaps voice, but there's no point in giving a voice for that because Siri or Google Home can actually just read it out. But then there are some results which would now be perhaps more appropriate as a sound file or a video file or an image file or a product for a carousel or a bio for a knowledge graph or whatever it might be. So you're looking at the deliverability of making content in the correct format. And I just did a weekly wisdom on SEMrush about creating a content strategy. And the idea that we all tend to just go, right, I'll create a blog. And that's aiming at the 10 blue links. But if you're creating a podcast or a video series or a webinar or an image gallery, you're suddenly aiming at the more interesting, richer parts. And that's the point as well. If you're thinking, well, there's no point in me getting an image into a SERP result, you're saying, well, it's a branding opportunity. And then you come back to brand, you're saying, okay, on SERP SEO, which I think you mentioned earlier on, is saying, rather than thinking I'm not getting the click, I am getting the visibility. I'm getting an impression. I'm being shown, and my brand is out there. So, I mean, perhaps one way to measure it is not so much the clicks you're getting through Search Console or onto analytics, but the impressions that you're getting. For the different types of element. And right now in Search Console, you can't measure very effectively those rich elements. You can only really measure the blue links. And there is actually confusing data in Search Console, which is that the site links also appear as an impression. So it's going to, if you've got site links with 3 site links, it's going to give you 4 impressions for just the 1 impression, which messes up the data no end and makes people foolishly run into foolish decisions about overestimating the volume of traffic or the potential volume of traffic that they might get out of that. But if some people are saying, and I've heard it said, that tools like SERP tracking tools, rank tracking tools are going to die out, they're not. As long as they keep doing like SEMrush and Authoritas and Searchmetrics have all done, is develop and say we can actually identify the rich elements. And so now we're going to have to look at KPIs which are rich element presence, as well as the blue links through Search Console or whatever, the traditional blue links. So the deliverability question would be trying to break things down into the different rich elements you're potentially aiming at and how much success you're having at getting those in front of people, as opposed to getting them through to your site.
Okay. And what about the metrics of the successful SEO strategy? Let's answer the question of our audience. What would you measure?
Well, I think if we come back to brand, one thing I think people might do well to start measuring is the number of brand searches. And if you're building your brand, you're going to get more brand searches. And also looking at your brand SERPs, the results that come up when somebody searches your brand, I think that's also underestimated. And in fact, obviously I'm name dropping, but John Mueller, when I talked to him about this, he said, yes, brand is the most underestimated element of an SEO strategy, people concentrating on how their brand looks in Google. And I think people are completely overlooking it. And if you look at that, your successful SEO strategy, if you look at it on the overall situation, is how many people are searching for your brand, how many words can you get people to put around it, to put context around your brand. So brand plus product, brand plus name of person, brand plus town, whatever it might be.
All these phrases related to our brand and maybe mixed with our brand. Yeah, that's really important.
So we're looking at entity, relationships, attributes, and that. Sorry, I just thought of that. That's another way to push attributes into Google's knowledge graph. Is if you can get your people, your clients, and your users to search for things that can contain the attributes, like you're going to be communicating to Google incredibly effectively once again.
Yeah, totally.
Brilliant stuff. Ooh, new idea.
Yeah, really good discussion today. Absolutely. So we have a fun part in our webinar series, and we usually send a really fun image to all our guests related to their life. So this is the image for you, and we would like you to give us an alt tag for this image.
An alt tag for
the alt tag of this image? Yes.
Look, Mum, no hands.
Can you repeat?
Look, Mum, no hands.
So where were you here? We see SEMrush wife.
Yeah, I can actually remember the exact moment that photo was taken. I walked into the hotel where the people from SEMrush Live were staying in Prague. And somebody pointed a camera at me and said, "Welcome, Jason." And that was my reaction. But if anybody ever bumps into me and says hello with lots of enthusiasm, they're going to get a wave and a smile and a silly comment back.
Yeah, and we really like the way how you make the things funny and at the same time educational. This is a really, really good approach, and I think you really found the best approach you can show to the audience, to educate at the same time to be funny, because when people open your Facebook profile, for example, they can see a lot of funny images. You always make something creative, something really funny, and something at the same time it's educational, and your posts are really, really good and educational. So thanks for being with us today. Really,
that's one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me. How very lovely. But in truth, that's the person I am. None of it is made up or fake. If you go and look up Buwa and Koala, the blue dog and the yellow koala, and watch some cartoons or some songs, you'll see that's where I'm coming from. That's the person I am. And so for me, enjoying this is the whole point. And an interview like today, I mean, you're asking really, really smart questions and allowing me to. Anton Schulke said 70% of the answer is in the question. Great questions. I think the answers were good and it was fun and we enjoyed it. Yeah.
So thank you. It was a very good compliment to this year. Yeah, and we're very happy to be our guest today here. Thanks for accepting our invitation. Unfortunately, we are running out of time at the moment, and we were to ask you our last question. How do you think the SEO strategies will change up to the end of the year? And do you expect any major changes, any surprising changes? And your top three tips to our audience as a final.
Okay. Well, I think the big change is that people are going to concentrate less and less on the blue links and more and more on getting those rich elements to come across. So it's not a new tip. It's something I said earlier on, but it's something I've been thinking about the last month or so. And it seems to me that these rich elements are the key to the future. And that we are going to start thinking about those rich elements as being a way to come into the results. My 3 tips would be: have a great content strategy, based on video or podcasts or blogs or whatever it might be, but think multimedia, think deliverability into the circumstances the person is looking for. Make sure you're understood, so use shitloads of schema markup, make sure you're corroborated, make sure you're informing Google, and obviously the third one is make sure that you prove to Google that you're the best, that you're better than your competitors. And it's not enough to be the best, you have to prove you're the best and prove it to Google.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for being here today with us. Thanks.
It was
really big thanks to our moderators behind the curtains today. Thanks to our sponsor Serpact too. We had a really great discussion, with full of pleasure discussion today. We will be expecting you next month too, and very soon we will announce our next guest. It will be a really interesting ex-Googler, so stay tuned. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube. Don't forget to follow also Jason Barnard on SEO is AEO, because it's a really interesting podcast. And have a nice day. Thanks for being with us today. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Dido. That was absolutely brilliant. I thought that was a really, really great exchange. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thank you.